Hey guys, what's up? We're back with some more WarFrame action, and today I kind of want to discuss the state of WarFrame. This is a thing that's sort of been brought up by some other people, and more importantly, like this week in particular, it's sort of this thing that has just really come into the spotlight. So let's just talk about it, you know? Let's talk about the state of, let's talk about the state of WarFrame as a game, where it's headed and where it's heading, and we'll also talk about the state of the community, because there seems to be some sort of behavior that's a little bit concerning that we need to talk about. I was trying to figure out a way of organizing this video to be something that wouldn't cause me to just ramble on for about half an hour, and after a few tries I figured we might as well approach this like a rework video. So what I normally do in a rework video, I identify and explain a problem. In this case, it will be a problem with the game or the community or something that was identified beforehand, and then I propose or explain a solution, whether it be a solution that's already in place or whether it's a solution that we could consider. And then with every point, you're more than welcome to discuss it in the comments. That's how it's going to work. Okay, let's go. So, the first thing I want to talk about is the state of the game before 2018. So right now it is 2018. Who'd have thought? Right now it's 2018, let's talk about the game before 2018. Now the major problem was this, okay? The foundation of the game wasn't fleshed out all that well, right? We're talking about things like poor weapon balancing, we're talking about poor mission design, almost, not really, but sort of, some of the missions were kind of useless, some of the nodes were not all that useful, and also resource farming in general was just, there are some examples of things that were just really, really bad in terms of resource farming and resource collection. Basically, the bread and butter of your looter shooter. If your shooting has some glaring issues and your looting has some glaring issues, then clearly we have some fundamental elements that need to be fixed in the game. And this is like a really important point, because this will lead eventually to my sort of third point, which is about the content drought, so I'll talk about that later. But suffice to say, if DE did not address this particular problem and just kept adding things on top of it, it'd be like building on continuing to build a building that has sort of a shaky foundation. At some point the game might actually collapse on itself and then become just this mess that nobody really likes. So that was the game before 2018. So let's talk about what's happened. The solution to this particular problem has actually been implemented for most of this year, which is that 2018 has been a spring cleaning year. So what do we mean by that? We mean this year DE has been sort of halting on the new stuff and mostly focusing on fixing things that already exist. So we're talking about mainline updates. For example, the Shrine of the Eidolon update, one of the biggest reworks in all of WarFrame history. This update of course showed up on the 9th of February 2018, and this is the update where a lot of Warframes, not all of them, but a lot of Warframes, and almost all of the primary and secondary weapons got a bit of a rework. So for the Warframes, a lot of the Warframes actually got reworks to the point where they actually had this sort of real sense of an actual spot in the game. I could go through them one by one, but I won't, because the one that I most certainly remember, because the one that I made an extensive detailed video going through and reviewing the rework for, was MAG. So the Shrine of the Eidolon update on February 2018 was the day that MAG went from good, of course I thought she was always great, but good to great, right? So this kind of rework, this kind of update was really important, because not only was MAG made into a viable game, at least, a viable Warframe, at least in the eyes of the community at large, but a lot of other Warframes were bumped up in their usefulness. There are still Warframes out there that need this treatment, for example Titania in particular, because I made a video about her as well. But for the most part, in terms of the health of the game, the Warframes are actually all in a relatively good spot. And then a lot of the weapons were given like a boost. So already the sniper rifles were made better during Plains of Eidolon as a direct result of Plains of Eidolon, because if you're going to be in a giant open space, you're going to need to have good sniper rifles. So naturally the sniper rework already made a lot of sniper rifles really good. But then the primary weapon rework basically gave new life to a lot of weapons that were kinda ignored at the time. I'm thinking Attica, but Attica got nerfed, so not really Attica. But like weapons such as Bratton Prime, they became at least somewhat viable early game. We've got some weapons that were at a high mastery rank. I can't really think of any off the top of my head at this particular point in time, but you got some weapons that were high on the mastery rank, and then they, instead of like getting bumped down to an earlier mastery rank, what happened was DE basically looked at the mastery ranks and said, okay, mastery ranks need to mean something in terms of weapon strength overall, so we're going to tune all of the weapons around the mastery rank they are. So a lot of weapons either had their mastery rank bumped up so that they're not hilariously overpowered, like compared to their mastery, or they had themselves buffed up to the strength that their mastery rank requires them to. So that was fantastic. One of the weapon reworks that definitely stuck with me would of course be the Cernos Prime change. Among the changes to Cernos Prime being a few number changes, there was also the change where you can now shoot vertically and horizontally with Cernos Prime. So that's where the rework, that's where that particular change came from, the Shrine of the Eidolon update. So, you know, just this update was very important. But this update didn't touch the beam weapons because they still needed to fix some things. So about 12 days later, on the 21st of February 2018, that's when the beam weapons changes came along. So that's when weapons like the Atomos, Sinoid Gamma Core, Ignis Wraith, those weapons just suddenly spike in popularity and in strength because they became really powerful. Apparently there was a time when beam weapons were like this, before there was a change that caused them to not be as good. I always thought that Sinoid Gamma Core was fantastic, just for the record, but apparently it was not. So the beam weapons were fixed up like 12 days later, so suddenly beam weapons are really strong and really popular. That ultimately is of course for the betterment of the game as opposed to the detriment. I don't know if that's for the benefit, that's the word I'm looking for the benefit of the game. And then later on in the 15th of March we had the dojo rework among other things. So that of course was another sort of little foundation thing. It's not as important as the beam weapons and the WarFrame and primary secondary weapon reworks, obviously, but having these kinds of mainline updates was the solution to the problem where the game's foundation was sort of falling apart. And let's be really clear here, this was something that the community has been asking DE to do for a while, at least before this year, obviously. So I am very satisfied with, like, the reason why I'm really satisfied myself with the way 2018 has been going at the present moment is because the community has set out a goal for DE to achieve, and I think DE is pretty much on their way to achieving that goal. So this is the solution to the problem, and I think that problem, at least until until we know the full details of the melee rework, but I reckon this problem is going to be solved by the end of the year. And now let's talk about the second problem that is kind of iffy and is not going to be something that I can praise DE on all that much, which is the removal of certain content from the game. This year on the 1st of March, this is before the dojo rework for context, the 1st of March, update 22.14 was the removal of trials. So for those who don't know, trials was essentially our raids. We had two trials. We had Law of Retribution and we had the Jawless Verdict. They were both removed because DE could not continue putting the resources and the manpower towards those particular aspects of the game, because it was just nothing but excessive bug fixing, especially on Jordan's Verdict actually. So they decided they had to pull the plug on Trials, which was really disappointing, and it's not really a move that I could praise DE on. Even though I wasn't really that much of a raid runner, I can see and I can empathize with people like, say, the raid school bus that existed back then. They would be rightly pissed because their entire community was existing to help people learn how to do a raid, learn how to do it with Trials. That was a bit of a problem. So obviously that's a problem that will exist. It's a problem that has existed basically when they pulled the plug. And I think the solution, what DE should do moving forward, and I've said this before in a previous video, but what DE should do is they should look at how Blizzard handle raids. They should look at how Bungie handles raids. And let's be very clear here. For all the things that you may think that WarFrame does better than Destiny, there is one thing that Destiny does better than Warframe that cannot be questioned, and that's raids. Okay? The Vault of Glass, Crota's End, King's Fall, the Siva raid, which I didn't play because at that point I actually gave up on the game. Even Leviathan, even though Leviathan was kind of ugh. And I'm sure the new raid, the Last Wish. Last Wish? Yes, Last Wish. If you look at the quality of those raids, and then you look at Law of Retribution, which was essentially like a multi-stage mission. It's essentially a larger form of the Assault mission type. And then if you look at the Jordan's Verdict, which at the very end was actually really messy and had like 1,500 steps that you had to remember or else you're going to screw it up for everyone else. You compared those raids, basically you can't compare those raids to the raids that exist in Destiny. And by extension I would assume you can't compare those raids to the raids that exist in Warframe. In Warcraft. So I think, moving forward, cop it in the chin, but DE really should look at how other games handle raids and raid-like encounters, and then try to make something that is as exciting, as interesting, and as rewarding as those raids. Because if you look at those games, the raids are an endgame, which means that if DE could look at how companies like Bungie, developers like Bungie, sorry, produce a raid, a good one in fact, you could kill two birds with one stone. Suddenly Fashion Frame is not the only endgame. So I'm really hoping that at some point DE will look into that. Whether or not raids will come back is a bit of a question, because Dark Sectors, we're still waiting for that to show up again. That's been missing since 2014, I think, or 15, one of those years. It's like it's been somewhere between 3 and 4 years since that particular game mode disappeared. So whether or not raids show up again in 3 or 4 years, I don't know. And I really hope it shows. And if they're going to do this, they have to do it faster. They have to do it sooner, because you have to wait a bunch of years like that. At this point, because the game is so popular, it's kind of not acceptable to have to wait so long for something to come back after it's actually been removed. Just look at Destiny and the absolute outrage that came about when some of the simple, some of the fundamental game modes were removed between Destiny 1 and then Destiny 2. Within a year, they're back. So I think DE needs to sort of approach this particular problem with that level of veracity and intent. And not desperation. Anyway, moving on. So, like I said, because there were a lot of mainline updates, and because this year has been a spring cleaning year, as well as the removal of trials, when you put them all together, what do we get? We get a content drought. Okay, so a content drought, for those who aren't fully aware of what's happening, The content drought exists because the last real major content drop, in my opinion, was the Sacrifice. The Sacrifice being the last main quest that we've had. That was dropped on the 15th of June 2018, okay? Since then, of course, we have had Limbo and Chroma Prime. Fantastic. I praise DE for continuing the Prime cycle, even though this has mostly been a spring cleaning year. Obviously, they had to, because if the Prime cycle just stopped as well, we would be having a totally different conversation right now. But good on you, DE, for continuing the Prime cycle, and we did have the Revenant show up, so that's okay, so that's cool. But of course, side note, the Revenant is, at least to me, I'm not fully on board with the Revenant in his current state. Hopefully he can get looked into as well, because there are some things that I don't like about him. I can make a video about him later, but for the time being I just don't really like him. And then for context, the last drop before the Sacrifice was Sanctuary Onslaught, which was 20th of May 2018. So between Sanctuary Onslaught and the Sacrifice there was about two months, where there was just bits and pieces here and there. And then of course between the Sacrifice and now, it's been 3.5 months, with only bits and pieces here and there and 2 primes. So, like, this is basically where the frustration from veteran players is coming from, because we've had months where content is just sort of not exactly coming. Like, there is, by definition, there is content. Limbo Prime is content. Chroma Prime is content. Yes, these things have been coming. And Revenant did come with a mini quest, but it was really just a glorified piece of farming for about, how long did that go for? 2 hours? 3 hours? And then a final mission. Kind of light, when you think about it. This, along with the removal of trials, is essentially where we're starting to get a little bit frustrated. Or in some cases, quite a bit frustrated with the lack of content this year. Now, that's the problem. Okay, that's the problem. That's the content drought. But I think the solution is coming. Okay, so I'm not like, this is why I'm not 100% like worried about this particular problem, because I'm at least somewhat confident that DE is in the process of fixing this. So DE has publicly recognized this. In fact, the whole reason why it's time to make a video like this is because Steve has come out in a dev stream and said, guys, we know there is a content drought, they know, they're not happy about it, and they're going to try and fix this. Excellent. I'm just making this video because I want to be more sort of in detail. I want to like detail out what's going on and what I think DE can do, and what maybe we can do to sort of fix this problem that is sort of happening right now in 2018. But DE knows what's going on. They've recognized it and they're trying to fix it. So at this point, there's no real need to like bitch and moan about it. Okay? They know. Stop. There's no real need to just yell at them and not be helpful. Instead, now what we should do, of course, is just be as helpful and provide as much constructive feedback as possible, because DE is one of the developers that actually listens and actually takes into account feedback, and sometimes, well, actually quite often acts on it. Sometimes they don't act on it, and that's annoying. For example, the Ivara Navigator augment. That was a bit of a fiasco. But for the most part, they're very receptive to constructive feedback. So I'm not too fussed. And like, let's just map out what we know is coming, and what I think will come with what we know is coming. So in terms of the content drought, what we know is Fortuna is going to come out at some point this year, probably. Most likely. It may be delayed for like a few weeks, but it should be coming this year. I'm confident with that particular assertion. So when Fortuna shows up, Fortuna by itself will have a lot of things to do because it's already like three times bigger than Plains of Eidolon. So great, huge area to explore. There's probably way more things to do, and I have heard some people saying that K-Drive is only content for like 3 days and that's it. I don't necessarily think so, because K-Drive, the longevity of things like K-Drive as in terms of content is wholly dependent on the longevity of Plains and Fortuna, or in this case Orvalis. Like the longevity of Orvalis and Plains will dictate the longevity of K-Drive and Arkwing on the land. And like they've demonstrated, like they've suggested, actually last week on the dev stream, we may also be getting Arkwing weapons on the ground, which should mean hopefully we'll see some more changes, more fixes, more foundational mainline fixes to Arkwing. In fact, this week I think the idea is we'll be getting a mainline update to get Infinite Arkwing into the game finally. So that's exciting. But yeah, Fortuna will come out. That'll give us at least quite a bit to look around with.
Me too.
And with Fortuna, and here's the big thing, with Fortuna, the idea is that Melee 3.0 should be coming as well. Which means we've already had primary weapon reworks, we've already had our secondary weapon reworks. That was the start of this year. Which means the third foundational element of combat in the game, being melee, is going to be sorted out when Fortuna comes out. That means, in terms of combat, sorry, we only have one thing left, and that's damage, which I'll talk about later. But we're basically we're going to be 3/4 of the way there, at least. Alright? And then most likely Railjack will come out sometime next year. I'm thinking maybe early next year, maybe around March. Don't quote me on that. That's not an official release date. I don't know what the official release date will be. I'm not a clairvoyant. I'm not even a limbo player. I am a limbo player actually, but I'm not an actual limbo, so I can't go through time. Don't quote me on this. But I think when Railjack comes out, there should also come an Arkwing rework, because otherwise Railjack will kind of suck partially. So when the Arkwing rework comes out with Railjack, that's another foundation of the game fully realized. Yay! Because Arkwing, I've said before, Arkwing needs some love, and I've made a video like talking about a potential Arkwing rework. Some people like it, some people don't like it. Feel free to discuss it. Go ahead. And then here's the big thing. Okay, here's the big thing. When Railjack comes out, along with the Arkwing rework, hopefully, that means our primary weapons are fine, our secondary weapons are fine, our beam weapons are god tier, our Arkwing will be great, hopefully we'll get a damage rework at some point before this, and that means the foundation of the game will be renewed and restored to a position where you can actually start piling new stuff on top of it. And when that happens, we'll probably get the new war. Fantastic. And then the game could start talking about, and then DE could start basically saying, okay, 2018 was our year of spring cleaning, we have basically been slowing down on new stuff, now it's time to just pile on new stuff. And what are we gonna do? I don't know, but let's say we're gonna introduce Tau. Great, we have an entire new system with an entire new bunch of crap to do, and we don't have to worry about our weapons sucking. We don't have to worry about Arkwing sucking. We don't have to worry about, we don't have to worry about fundamental things not performing up to standard, because we've already fixed all of that, and therefore we have this really, really strong foundation for the game to just explode in growth. And that's why I'm not entirely worried about this particular content drought, because I think the solution is coming. Hopefully. And hopefully, D will continue to look at some things that people are still worried about. We'll talk about that later. Right, now let's sort of switch gears and talk about the community, because apparently there is a problem. There's a problem that's sort of, I'm hoping, is in a vocal minority, and that's some people are kind of calling veteran Warframe YouTubers elitist. Not a particularly useful bit of criticism, really, for providing constructive but otherwise criticism of Warframe. Kind of like how I am right now. For example, there are phrases that sometimes get bandied around like, oh, this game is free, so why you complaining, man? At least you don't have to pay for it. Or, oh, if you don't like the game, go play something else. It's not particularly helpful advice, really. So naturally the solution is really just, if you're going to do that, just don't. I can't really offer much of a solution to this, as there's no real way to stop it. What I do want to point out is that the Warframe community continues to hold the reputation, I think, as one of the nicest, if not the nicest, and most generous gaming communities in existence. Let's not destroy that with this silly little infighting of new players potentially, or mid-game players attacking veterans for criticizing the game, or attacking new players for potentially muddying the waters of the community as a whole. Like, that's just a bit silly. There's no need for that, okay? We're all, at risk of sounding like High School Musical, we're all in this together. Let's move on. I do want to make an observation though in relation to this particular kind of behavior, and that may have something to do, like, I feel like this kind of behavior may have been born of an echo chamber. So like, if you look at any video about Warframe outside of like a handful, pretty much every video that isn't just like informative, like for example, if it's not a video like this is everything to do with chroma, this is a rework idea, or this is how something works. If you remove all of the videos about Warframe and just look at the opinion videos about Warframe, they're all pretty much just this unbridled praise of Warframe. And that's great. Warframe is not undeserving of an unbridled praise. It is a great game. I don't think anyone is going to argue against that. But I feel like these videos, like, they just build this idea that this game is a game beyond reproach. Is that the right word? That to criticize the game in any way is blasphemy of the highest order. And that to even speak ill of this game, you must be condemned. And that's really where some of this behavior comes from. This game is free, stop complaining.
You are here to find
except this game is a game that we like so much. Mind you, this is a game that I have definitely spent more than 2,000 hours in. There are people who have spent more than 3,000 hours in. I'm already up to my daily reward login of like 960 something, 70 something. I'm nearing that 1,000 login reward. I'm getting there. And when login reward 2.0 or 3.0, 2.0 shows up, let's get some stuff. But we like this game so much that we want to make it better. And the only real way for us to make it better, because we're not actually the developers ourselves, we need to explain what's wrong with the game and how we could fix it. We can also then say what's great with the game and how to make it better. Because there are some things that I love about the game that I think could be better as well. For example, Paris Prime. Please buff it. But, you know. In the meantime though, when you see like this constant barrage of videos, WarFrame is the best game ever! WarFrame just destroyed X, Y, and Z. And, of course, the big daddy of WarFrame videos. WarFrame is better than Destiny. Oh my god. I make the comparison as well, but I don't make the comparison just purely to shit on Destiny. I make the comparison because I want Destiny to be better. It's fine to compare WarFrame with Destiny and Destiny with WarFrame if you want the games to become better. That's what I want to do. Because Destiny 2, the way it is right now, is fantastic. And in some ways, it's better than WarFrame. For example, right now, every week there is a new story mission. Great! That is awesome. I really like some of the lore and some of the themes in Destiny 2 at the present moment. Some of the way they tell their story at the moment is in some ways better than the way WarFrame tells their story. And frankly, if DE looks at the way that Bungie tells their stories and uses some of those techniques, that would only make the game so much better. Like I said, raids. If DE looks at how Bungie handles raids, that will only make the game better. That's all I want. That's all I really want. Because I want WarFrame to be so much better than how it is, because as it progresses, we'll have more and more game modes. We should then use those game modes to tell more and more stories. So when Steve says, okay, we're gonna try and tell a story about Ordis, oh, great, do it! Do it. I can't wait to see how Steve tries to tell a story about Ordis. Maybe it's going to be something abstract. Maybe it's going to be something weird. Maybe, like, I don't know.
Excellent armaments, operator.
Because the way they told the sacrifice, that's something that I don't think Bungie can do because of the way their characters are. Because the Guardian is an adult, and because the Guardian is controlling themselves, you can't really do that sort of daddy-son, father-son relationship type thing, because there's really no father figure in Destiny. So that's where Bungie has sort of, I guess, thrown themselves into a bit of a corner in terms of storytelling. Whereas DE, because you're playing a child who's controlling a Warframe, and we still don't know much about the Warframes, explore that, go into some weird family aspect type thing. You got so many stories to tell, man. It's only going to make the game better. Anyway, so coming back to the point of a bunch of videos that are just unbridled praise, potentially unuseful praise, in fact, of Destiny. I think this kind of content should basically stop. If you want to compare Warframe to Destiny and Destiny to Warframe, you should do so with the intention that both games can improve upon one another. Because whilst Warframe and Destiny are very different games, it's still perfectly possible to compare one game with another game. It's not really that hard. And anyone who says, oh, you can't compare Warframe to Destiny, they're totally different games. Not really. They're not so terribly different that you can't compare them. It's not like comparing Warframe to chess. I can't compare Warframe to chess. But Warframe and Destiny, for example, and I'm really going to use those two examples because I play both of them. So, Warframe and Destiny, you can compare them, okay? But I think if you're going to compare them, let's try to compare them in a constructive manner so that both of these games can then become better. And when you're reviewing Warframe, I think if you're going to review Warframe, I think it's time that we should review Warframe and consider what's great about the game, but then also talk about some of the flaws. I've already talked about some of the things that are still a problem, and some other things that are still a problem despite the aforementioned spring cleaning of this year. Would be, like I said, Titania still needs a rework. Arcwing still kind of sucks, but I think that will be fixed when Railjack shows up. Damage, specifically damage 3.0, and in particular electric and magnetic damage being more or less useless. Electric being a damage type that is, like, the damage is kind of not all that useful. It only does extra damage to Grenier rollers that have little health and Corpus mowers, except radiation damage exists, so... and magnetic is only good against shields, so that's basically 1/3 of the enemies that exist in the game, and that's it. So damage 3.0 should show up at some point. That'll definitely fix a major flaw in the game. And then, of course, one of the things that I think if you're going to review Warframe, you should definitely talk about, if not even just for a little bit, which is that for veteran players and for players who have made it past the sacrifice, who are now into this end game, there's not really an end game. Because once you've achieved what you want with, say, Focus, which was an end game, which is an end game, mind you. It's fair enough to call Focus an end game because there's a lot of grinding, but once you have achieved what you want with Focus, there's not really too much to do at the present moment, especially with the content drought. I log in, I do my sorties. At most these days my end game is just making sure that my Rivens don't suck. So at some point my end game will become re-rolling my Paris Prime Riven until I get something that could actually compete with my Sonos Prime. And then the cycle continues. That's kind of my end game at this particular point in time. And that's if I decide to go and do it. If we had a raid, that would be my end game. Etc, etc. So, you know, there are still things that need to be improved. Alright. That's it. Let's just finish off with some final thoughts. So for the community, I want to say that this community has, and I think will always be, one of the strongest communities that has ever existed in all of gaming. Whether that's a function of the co-op nature of the game, or simply the nature of those who play and continue to play Warframe. I can't really think of any other community that I have been a part of that is as peaceful, more or less, as the Warframe community. Hopefully the behaviour that is a bit concerning is only relegated to just a vocal minority, and that the rest of us eagerly await for what DE has in store, such as Fortuna, Railjack, and then the new war. I can't wait for that stuff. It's been fantastic, I reckon. And then for the veterans, I just want to say, for us, hang in there. I really think content drought is almost over. Like the drought in Australia. Moving on. Like I said, when Fortuna comes, Melee 3.0 should be coming. Whether or not we'll get Damage 3.0 at the same time, don't know. After Fortuna, there'll be Railjack, and with Railjack will come Arcwing, the rework. If Railjack is what we saw in 10 Live 2018, it's going to be great. Space battles, can't wait. And then, with all those foundations fixed, we're gonna get the new war. And when we get the new war, who the hell knows what's next? So, I'm more or less okay with the way that Warframe is going. I can see where some people would be frustrated. I can see where some people would think, wow, why are you so frustrated? This is why. And, you know, let's keep ourselves level-headed. Let's keep a healthy amount of hype. Not too much, but not so little that you decide to just abandon the game altogether. No need for that, because I think it's going to bounce right back up. And yeah, that's literally it. Okay, hope you guys enjoyed this. What are we looking at? 40-minute rant. Wow. Even when I try to organize a video, it still takes half an hour for me to get an entire point across. Hope you guys enjoyed this. If you did, hit the like button. If you really enjoyed it, maybe consider subscribing to my channel. Let me know what you guys think about the state of the game. How you feel. Do you feel any frustration, or are you like me, sort of more or less going with the flow, playing some other things on the side? I just finished playing Spider-Man while I'm waiting for stuff to come in WarFrame. Really good game, definitely recommend it. Still enjoying Destiny 2, like I said. Trying to get back into HOTS. At the same time, like, you know, there's just always things to do, and then of course I work full time, so it's not like my time is just there and not doing anything. But yeah, until next time, I'll see you guys later. Thanks for watching. Bye!